on the show today, Liz Peters. So Liz is a long-term improviser. She does corporate work in improvisation. She's just written a book on confidence and communication. She's a graduate of the Embodied Facilitator course and someone I know and love and a fellow Brightonian. So Liz, welcome.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Are you in Brighton today?
I am in gloriously sunny Brighton. Yep, I've closed the windows to make sure that you can hear me well, but it's a gorgeous blue sky here in Brighton, as it should be.
It's sunny Brighton. Well, I'm in the hippie capital of Glastonbury, for our foreign listeners who don't know where that is, the Isle of Avalon, and everyone's floating down the street in these crystal shops. And I was in the Goddess Temple yesterday, just relaxing after EFC.
Oh.
So,
what's a Goddess Temple? Is that a temple full of goddesses?
There's a whole goddess movement here, sort of pagan thing. All my mentors is involved, and it's incredibly hippie and new age in places, but it is what it is, and I quite like it. So I had quite a chilled out time getting a massage in the Goddess Temple yesterday. So, yeah, you've got me in a relaxed mood.
Oh, nice.
So, Liz, how did you get interested in the body? What was your way into this?
So my journey into being interested in the body, I guess from an early age, I'd done quite a lot of dance. So at the age of about 6, I started doing ballet and modern. So those kind of really quite rigid practices. So I was doing dance from a very early age. And then at the age of 18, I went to drama school. And that's where we started to learn a little bit more about movement and expression, how to use the voice and the physicality of character and those sort of things. From that point, I was really working in entertainment for quite a few years. So still using the dance stuff and improvisation and that. But it really wasn't until about 5 years ago that it just took a real shift in understanding for me, is when I did the EFC course, the Embodied Facilitator course. And I just started to recognize in a way that I guess is obvious, but it never occurred to me before, about how your movement affects your state of mind. And that was a real game changer for me doing the EFC course. It just opened me up into a whole new way of being, and since then I've had a daily yoga practice, and yeah, it's really changed my experience of life, I guess.
Cool. It's interesting to hear from performers, because to some of them the embodiment piece is completely missing. For some it's very obvious, and for many somewhere in the middle. And I also remember your talent show piece. You did everybody else was just sort of doing sort of fairly incompetent, silly things, and you put on this like professional level comedy piece. And I was like, wow, this is, you're professionally funny. How is it being professionally funny? I mean, do people expect you to always be able to tell jokes and funny on? Is it like being a doctor? Everyone's always asking you for diagnosis, the equivalent.
You do get when I meet strangers and I tell them I do improvisation, and people are like, "Oh, what is that?" I make up comedy on stage, or I make up musicals, and people don't really get it. They often will think, "But there's a trick, right? You have a stack of jokes." So they do want me to. I think that people want to catch you out a little bit with that. And when I was doing stand up for a few years. And if I mentioned that to people, they'd be like, "Tell us a joke." But my stuff wasn't really about jokes. It was more about being enjoyable to watch, I suppose, like physical comedy, musical comedy. I didn't really have like a bunch of puns in my back pocket. So.
And now the idea of improv, had other people on the show like Rachel Blackman and John Kramer, who of course in Brighton. Talk about
I'm in a company with John Kramer, yeah.
You do, John. So that was the episode that almost got us taken off the internet. We thought very carefully about whether we should release that one or not. John and I were very naughty the entire time, but it doesn't seem to have had too much kickback. But for listeners out there,
nothing less from the parents.
it was really. We should have been supervised, Liz. We should have been. So listeners can listen back to those. But very briefly, if people missed those. The idea of improv, can you sort of say what that is?
Yeah, sure. So improvisation is making something up live in the moment, and it's creating a show without a script, in the sense that when I'm doing it on stage. So there's sort of two different angles we can look at this. But when I'm performing on stage, I'm creating an entire show that has no script and no plan, no preparation. So that means creating songs live in the moment, and not having a plan. And that's what I do on stage. So I have a company called the Maydays, and we perform musicals. But we've worked together so long that we find it really easy to collaborate with each other and just sort of be really in the moment and like just.
So this might be astounding to some listeners. You're not just making up jokes; you're making up songs.
Oh yeah.
And I went to see a show of yours at the Brighton Festival, and it was kind of loosely themed around Enid Blyton, if I remember. And then people would just shout things out, and they'd say this and that, and then you just start making songs, and the plot would develop, and the whole sort of storyline and all the songs were completely improvised in that moment.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of different styles of performance improv. And one of them is the one that everyone's kind of familiar with, which is the "whose line is it anyway" style. Like that's your sort of benchmark that people have generally seen that, and those are what we call short form games. So you have you have a structure. This person's going to be your arms for a minute, and you're going to speak in a Russian accent or whatever. There's a parameter around the game, and it lasts for 5 minutes. And I do that sort of thing in corporate environments and whatnot.
I would like to do the rest of this interview in the Russian accent. Are you okay with that?
I thought you didn't want to get taken off the internet.
No, Russians do not get offended. They are not too weak.
Okay,
they are not easily offended, so do not worry.
Well, I'm not worried anymore, Mark. We'll do it this way.
And this is like an astoundingly sort of shocking and sometimes terrifying idea to people, that you would get up on a stage without knowing what the fuck you're going to do.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, it is. So the short form stuff is great training wheels and practice, and it's very audience friendly. It's very easy and bite sized. But the stuff that I tour with, and I've been around the world with various shows, is full hour long musicals. So with that, we will get something at the beginning of the show. So for example, the Maydays do a Tim Burton style musical called Happily Never After, and at the beginning of that we just get an audience suggestion for a profession of one of their grandparents, and then we just bounce off that and we create an entire musical from that point. So we don't take any further suggestions from that point. We just stay totally present with each other and co-create a full musical from that point.
And you said something key here. So they're being totally present. This is where it has a lot in common with awareness-based disciplines. I've heard improv described as sort of meditation for extroverts. That this sort of staying fully present and then like deeply listening to what wants to emerge.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that for me, I'm a pretty high energy type of person, and for me, I feel incredibly present when I'm doing improv in a way that I still struggle with when I do a sitting meditation. Like, I'm getting much better at sitting and meditating in that way.
Because you do yoga and meditation and stuff now as well, don't you? Yeah.
Yes,
obviously, because we live in Brighton.
Yeah.
You have to do yoga and meditation. If you don't, you get taken outside and shot. So, so people that have sort of ADHD like me, it's quite tempting, isn't it, to be like, okay, this is I can lose myself in the moment, be immersed in something, get all the benefits of that, but without having to sort of just sit down and be still.
Yeah, definitely. And but the key thing I think is that there is still 100%. There's a focus there. It can't be, you're not just wildly coming up with whatever you fancy in that moment. You have to be really focused on your scene partner. Focus on the person.
Let's do it now. I didn't prep you for this, but let's do it now. So
oh my God, you didn't prep me for some improv. I don't think I'll be able to do it.
Why don't we do that? So the scene is improvisation teacher who secretly prepares.
Oh no, shit, you busted me.
What do you reckon? You reckon we could do that? So,
okay.
So I'd be the investigative journalist.
Yeah.
So, Piz Liters, you've been accused by the Improv Guild of this country for actually writing scripts and lines for your improv. What do you have to say for yourself?
No, I don't write anything. No, everything comes out live in the moment.
But it's been proven. It's been proven, and you're on Channel 4, and there was an expose, and it's all been proven.
Well, what are you going to do? They're still funny though, aren't they? My jokes. They're still
yes,
making
they
people
are.
laugh.
Yes, they are.
I made them up once. They were original once.
And would you say that the fact that you're from the north is helpful in this?
Yeah.
Our international listeners are going to be asking why you sound like Jon Snow.
It's because I'm from the north. I wrote my jokes in the south and then I mailed them up north so that no one would know where they'd come from and I could get away with it.
Got it. But they stunk of cocktails, so people knew.
That's how I got busted. That's why I'm on the Channel 4 programme and I can't believe it ruined my career.
Because they stunk of cocktails and lack of icon. You want to see? There we go.
There we go.
There we go. That was amazing. Yeah, and then we enthusiastically clap because that's what improv teachers do.
Absolutely.
We go, because you're great. I've seen also people. A lot of people don't realize this. You're not just an improviser, but you're fucking great at teaching people who are scared shitless because people come to you for the Maydays regularly, right? You have these startup groups and they do. Is it 8 weeks in Brighton, and they have to do a show at the end of it?
Yeah,
and you're that super encouraging person.
I think I am pretty encouraging. I think we run 8-week courses here. I do stuff with businesses and drop-in classes and stuff. So I'm always meeting people who walk through the door and they're scared. There's a part of them that's gone, I want to come to this improv class for a reason. But I don't really trust myself that was a good idea. So people are kind of coming in with this sort of double-edged feeling of like, I want to do it, but shit, why the hell did I sign up for this? So my job, and this is something I really take a lot of pleasure in, is facilitating in other people a playfulness and an ease. And I think that's all people need, is to be able to relax and trust that they are enough. Because I think what a lot of people will worry about when they come to an improv class for the first time is, I'm not clever enough, I'm not funny enough, I'm going to be made a fool of.
Yeah.
And that's really, really not
true.
What it's about at all. Yeah. People, what fascinates me about working with people is that everyone's different. Everyone is unique. And if you and I were to create an improv scene together, just like that boss one that we just created, that would be entirely different if, say, you and Rachel, for example, would create one.
There'd be a lot more unicorn sex in my version. I think we know that would not happen in Rachel's. So that ability to reassure people, and they sort of think you're magic, don't they? They think you're kind of amazing. And I saw this on the FC when you've helped out there, when you've been like reassuring people. You have to be super encouraging to people. There's a lot of like dealing with people's like inner fears and by the way, every time I say EFC, you go bing, and I get a point for a plug. Every time you mention your book, I go bing, and you get a point for your plug. And I'm 2-0 up right now. Book, there we go. So okay, but what I've definitely seen you do is be able to encourage and reassure people fairly expertly, because they are so scared of this situation, and that's what gets in their way, right? Because as soon as people have fear, they stop being in the moment. They tighten up. They can't speak. They can't think of anything.
Absolutely. Fear is the biggest killer. Fear is the biggest killer of everyone.
Fear is the mind killer. It's like June. Ride the worm of embodiment.
But fear is definitely like the thing that will cause you to shut down and live your own fear that you can't improvise. We get in our own way. So my role is to allow people to be totally comfortable with whatever shit comes out of their mouth, especially in those early days, because what I'm asking people to do is to let go of their filter and just be totally present, totally playful. And that, for a lot of people, is intimidating, because we've learned that we need a filter to get by in society. So if you come into a room and I say...
I've heard they're useful.
Apparently you should get one, Mark.
I regularly get told I need a bigger one. Do you think too much improv could make you too unfiltered? Because John and I both risk a lot of trouble. He's a friend of mine, as you know. We risk a lot of trouble quite regularly, and Rachel blurts things out and you blurt things out. Is there like a life risk in learning this skill too well?
I definitely think that in the last 10 years, my mouth has got a little looser.
A looser mouth. That's the biggest worry here.
I've got a loose mouth. I do think
to loose orifices.
But pardon?
Improv leads to loose orifices. That's what we've determined.
That is true. So yeah, if you're first arriving, then your downstairs orifice is terribly loose, and then when you do it for 10 years, your upstairs orifice is loose.
So it's really the journey from having a loose ass to a loose mouth.
Exactly.
Essentially, it's just a sort of sphinctal tube movement of tension. Everything we're discussing here.
Exactly.
I've never thought of it that way before. Look what you create.
I have noticed, in the last 10 years, I guess, as this has become such a big part of my life, like improv is a thing that I do / teach more than anything else. And I'm really comfortable now in that kind of, okay, well, we'll just go with the flow. We'll see what happens. Don't need a plan.
Yes.
And so there is a need, I guess, to balance that with some slightly more pragmatic practice that is just like, okay, sometimes it's good to have a plan, and not just say whatever comes out of your.
Some of my students on EFC, Bing,
Titting,
are actually quite horrified when they see me without a plan at the beginning of a session. And I feel like for anyone in any walk of life, this ability to improvise can become just a critical life skill. And then I think you can almost lean on it too heavily at times. There's times where I'd be better off doing a bit more planning, I found now. And I can almost get lazy about my planning because it's too easy to improvise now, I feel like that's maybe a danger in there. But tell me about your corporate, let's pretend this is a proper interview. So tell me about your corporate work then, because when you take this into business, A, why do they give you money? Like, why should they get Funny Woman in? And B, how do they take it?
So different companies will ask for different things. And just the other day, I was doing one on collaborative thinking with one company, which is basically improvisation is how do we create something as a unit rather than having a leader who's dragging everyone along. So one aspect of it is the collaborative thinking. I'll do a lot on leadership courses, a lot of leadership programs, because there's the parallel of being a leader, which is adapting to the unknown and having to make decisions when you're not 100% sure of what you're doing. And so I'll work with people on communication in that way, and how do you communicate with people? How do you build ideas? How do you become innovative? So it's really using those exercises, but as a vehicle for awareness of your own patterns. Because what you find is that if improv is just you, it's only ever going to be you and your thoughts, what you bring to it and your responses. And so if we look at it as what you do in an improv scene is your behavior under a microscope. So we can look at it that way and say, okay, so you respond like this in this made up, completely safe and playful environment. So how do you behave like that in your real job, and how does that affect outcomes from that? Because this is your pattern, because we're witnessing your pattern through the work that we're doing in improv.
You know, that sounds a lot like embodied work, Liz.
Doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Like revealing patterns for people. And
yeah.
Do you think it's almost more honest under that? I've heard this saying, like, everyone just plays themselves, There's something that's more honest about that pressurized microscope. I just interviewed someone for the podcast before who's a martial artist, and he said, look, under the pressure of attack, there's honesty in patterns that get revealed. And I wonder if there's a similar thing with improv, under that pressure of performance and having to be spontaneous. Yeah,
I think so. There's no time to come outside yourself and assess what your next move is going to be and make sure it's a good one. It really is coming from your guts. How you're not choosing what you're going to do; it's just happening. So where does that come from? That comes from how you are and the patterns that you have. And of course, we can play different characters, and you can use your embodiment, or you're changing your voice, or things to get into different mindsets and different attitudes and approaches. But at the end of the day, it's all coming out of you. So it's all in you somewhere. Yeah. And I think something I found just really great when I started working with you on EFC because you have you have a phrase that you use, which is awareness, acceptance, and intention for embodiment.
Yeah.
And there's a phrase that we use for improv, which is listen, yes, and commit. And it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same process. Listen, become aware of exactly what's happening, be really present with what really is. Yes, and / acceptance, accept that this reality is, and then we have add something to it, commit to that, and then intention, how do I want to be? So it's the crossover for me of starting to really understand embodied work and seeing how that.
What does it add to it for people? Because it seems to be a degree of embodiment in improv. Like I remember years ago, before you'd done stuff with me, you'd was in one of your classes, and you started us off with just a movement. I had a limp or something, and a whole character came out of that. So there is a degree of sort of embodied work in any kind of theatre or improv. But what do you think it really adds to it, to improv work, going more into embodiment work more generally than just what's already there?
Certainly for the comedy and theatrical side of improv, then the character play. So we mentioned there having a limp, and then allowing that to go through your body, and then that does change the sort of way that you'll be in the scene. So using it for the characters, that's obviously very, very useful. And I think the sort of for me, the sort of liberation, the physical liberation and playfulness. A lot of what we do is games as a warm up in classes. It's some quite physical, like throwing stuff around or shapes. So loosening up physically, because I think when your body is constricted, your thoughts are constricted, right? So if you're rigid, you're tense, you're not going to have a huge pool of playfulness with which to start dipping in, grabbing fish out and throwing it. You have a very, very narrow pool. But when you can let go physically and really just sort of be more fluid and playful in those games with your body, you start to unlock these different choices that you can make in a scene. And the more you do that, you're just opening little doors into other sides of your personality. It's just, this is a bit of me that I don't normally do, but here in this environment, I get to be, a statuesque queen who gives people orders, and I'll embody that, and I'll be upright and chest forward and strong and grounded, and that makes me feel very different. And that makes me play differently. That makes it be different.
Because most people are stuck in their habitual way of being, by a habitual way of physicality, right? So attention patterns keep their personality kind of in place. There isn't a flexibility there.
Yeah, absolutely. And get to play around with that. Like, how in what other environment do you get to pretend to be a stammering hunchback or a big regal queen or some kind of a lion? And we don't really get to explore those aspects of our personality. So we get in these very narrow fields, and actually there's loads. Everyone's got loads going on. We want to play with it. Yeah,
and there is this connection between stress and creativity that's very obvious, right? People aren't creative or funny when they're stressed, very likely. This seems, and when people go into creativity and humor, it tends to be that reduces their stress. So there's this sort of connection between those two things.
Yeah, definitely. And we talked earlier about people being very nervous or coming to improv classes because they want to build their confidence and things, and you can physically see people relax when they get their first laugh. It's like suddenly it's like, actually, and then when you get that relaxed state, then it all becomes a little easier, and so it sort of feeds itself. You get better way.
I did a big talk the other day. I was on stage and I was dead nervous, a bit bigger than the groups I normally work with, and I told my first joke and they kind of laughed and I kind of smiled, and it was like, from then on it kind of flowed, like we're good.
It's like taking the stopper out, isn't it? It's like,
great.
It's always the fear. I think the fear of the anticipation of doing something so much worse than the experience. Always, especially when it comes to doing talks or anything like that. You're sort of stepping coming up to that moment, it's like, oh, what if this, what if that, and then when you just can physically relax and be present with it, and then, well, this is what is, and I'm perfectly capable of interacting with that, then it's easier. We just relax more.
And just like the key thing here, I think you've come to specialize in, is not just standing on stage or being funny, not just helping other people relax into that, which I think is a big deal, but also both of those things are two huge skill sets, but also like how to transfer it into life. So this is sort of one of my obsessions with embodiment, because there's no point being at stand on stage and tell a funny joke if you can't do a best man speech, if you can't do a presentation at work. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that transfer of some of these skills.
Sure. So in terms of bringing improv into the real world, I mean, everything is improvised. There is no script. And when you are in a practice of making stuff up, be in the, I want to say dojo, maybe it's 'cause I'm talking to you, but I never call it a dojo, in the workshop room. If you get used to like letting go in there, that becomes a more natural feeling. So you are more comfortable being relaxed and present, even in a structured situation like doing a best man speech.
I'm trying to imagine a really structured Japanese sensei doing improv. Like, welcome to the improv dojo. Like, everyone lined up in straight lines, because there's that form and freedom thing we play with, isn't there? And there's the four, like, I've just, where I've just come from, Liz?
Pardon?
EFC. I've just come from EFC.
Have you just come from Ting EFC?
Sorry, it's really on my mind. So I'm sort of making a joke about plugging it just because I've been obsessed with it for the last week.
Well, it's worth being obsessed with. I do. I honestly, that course, I'm helping you out now, Mark, but that course is groundbreaking and quite life changing. And so,
thank you. And I appreciate that. that. And
changed my life.
I appreciate you saying that. We're plugging your book, though. Bing! Not my course. So conversations are so much better when they get more real. But one thing we have in that course is the polarity between the sort of form and the freedom, right? So we'll have like you or Rachel do the improv sessions, and then we'll have like the Japanese martial arts sessions. And it's like there's definitely something you can get from like both of those extremes, aren't there? And I know you do some pretty form-based yoga and stuff now.
Mm-hmm. Which has been really good for me, because years of doing improv and just dancing about in whatever rhythm I fancy doing it. It gets a little bit too much on the freedom side. So the form stuff is important. And I think as well, something that I do notice is too much freedom is restrictive to the mind as well, because
you need limitations, right? Like in the improv, you have a session, you don't just say do anything. It can really help people to say, right, you're a Russian and you're on the moon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I put someone on stage and I say just go, whatever you want, go, the wealth of possibilities, because anything is possible. You could be on the moon, you could be in a potholing, whatever, and there are so many possibilities.
It's too many.
It just the brain just goes, I'm out. Whereas if you just narrow those limitations, then people have a playground with which they can then flourish and create. So I think creativity, it needs obstacles to happen. It needs structure and obstacles to.
Yeah, you don't have a game unless you have a football pitch and goalposts and rules, right?
Yeah.
So I feel there's also a paradox with form and freedom, isn't there? Like the form practices, actually, there's the freedom can be found within that, and the freedom practices often do have a form. Like staying with your body and by rhythms and listening to your body is a form. There's a very strict form in that. I remember one fire rhythm teacher, Kate Sheila, she said to me, like, you're not sticking with the practice. There's holes in your practice. She was quite strict with me. I was like, I thought we just fucking dancing around, And it's like, so like. The form and freedom is often a sort of yin-yang thing going on, isn't there, within them that isn't quite obvious to people. And I think it's very teenage when people just want to do the freedom and think there's no form in that, and it can get very anal and uptight if it's all just form. Like I was just watching a martial arts teacher on EFC really struggling with the improv sessions, and that was just really great for him to do the free dance and the improv and the free spontaneous expressive type stuff. And I just really would say to listeners, like, both are well worth exploring. And the one thing I would notice about improv, this relates to something you said earlier, is when I suggest it to people as a practice, it's the one that they have the most, oh shit, I was hoping you wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because when I suggest karate to the freedom people, they're like, okay, yeah, that might be hard, but I'll give it a go. But when I suggest improv to the more uptight people, they're nearly always like literally like face palming when I suggest it. So it seems to be one of the scarier things you can suggest, even more than martial arts or whatever, you know?
I definitely see that. I get that a lot when if I'm brought into a corporate environment, for example, or an organization where, you know, not everyone has elected to do it. There is a lot of anxiety there, and I think that does come from, like, again, this absolute freedom of what will happen to me. Like, if you're going to put me up here in front of everyone and make me just do stuff, whereas with say karate practice, like, okay, I've seen karate on the TV, like I understand what this is. I process that.
Follow the rules.
Yeah, there's some rules. I probably won't be that great at first, but I know there's
it's not unknown though, is it? It's better to be bad than to not know at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, people are, okay, I'm going to be a bit crap because I'm learning the steps and that's normal, and all the other white belts will be a bit crap too. Whereas with this, it's the unknown quality to it, I think. And
being a bit crap as yourself as well. So, like, if you can be a bit crap at karaoke, yeah, singing.
Karaoke. I did art of karaoke.
Yes, you can be karaoke, my new musical.
You sing and then you get punched in the mouth if your singing isn't good enough. How about that? Karaoke, the ancient art.
Trademark
that. Good. That would actually make quite a good TV show, I think. It's sort of like a sort of death match version of Pop Idol. That would be amazing. Anyway, I'll save that idea. I'm going off on a tangent, which tends to be what people who do too much improvising do all the fucking time.
So with karate, I guess you go into there going, this is a skill I don't know how to do yet. There are experts here. I will learn it. Like, whereas when you're going into an improv class, I'm not asking you to not know a skill yet. I'm just I'm asking you to just give it a go, and whatever comes out of you is what you thought of, and there's no getting away from that. That's all coming from you. So that's a very, very daunting place for a lot of people.
Yes. And can I just say, Liz, you're doing a great job of keeping this interview on track. I really appreciate it. Like, you've got much more form than I have today. Too much freedom. You're doing much better than me. So what question should I be asking you? What would be like the best question to ask an improviser, rather than the normal fucking ones you always get asked that are boring?
Oh, the best question. Well, it certainly wouldn't be what's the secret? What are you really doing? There's no secret.
That's what you
we are just making it up. There's no fucking notes in my pocket that I've learned. I haven't learned the whole script. So yeah. I guess, why do I do it?
Why do you do it? Well, that's a nice question. Thanks for doing my job. I appreciate
it. All right.
So,
you're welcome.
Why would you do it? Good question.
I find it utterly exhilarating when I'm on stage doing a show with people that I trust, and I think that's a key thing. Is who are you with as well? It's not a solo activity. So when I'm on stage with people that I really, really trust, it is like going into a flow state. I don't think about a single other thing for the hour. All I am doing is I'm focused on this thing that is emerging from all of our hearts and minds that none of us know is what it's going to be, and we're just in there for the ride, and we're figuring it out at the same time as everyone else. And that is really quite a special experience. You know, we'll stand backstage before a show and go, oh, we don't know what we're going to do. See you on the other side. And
so there's a shared vulnerability that leads to a lot of intimacy, I imagine.
Yeah, there's a lot of trust.
Does it ruin it if you shag?
I've never shagged an improviser, but
because like in theatre they have a rule, don't they? You can't shag till after the show. You know this rule in theatre.
I didn't know that was a rule.
Yep. In theatre companies, you can't do it. You're not supposed to, because it can ruin the characterizations and the character relationships.
Keeping the frisson on stage, you mean?
Exactly. So it can change things, you know. if you go to do that. I mean, can you improvise with people you hate, or does there have to be that trust?
I think you can improvise with anyone, but I think, can you enjoy improvising with people you hate? Oh, that's interesting, because can you really be trying to think if there's anyone I hate that I can even
combat improvisation? Like, because often it looks like improvisers are having a go at each other, or they're doing they're trying to sort of cut each other down, but actually underneath it, you can see they're both on the same team quite often, or at least there's enough shared relationship they don't get upset by the burns, Liz, why don't we spend the last bit of time we have here talking about like what you're actually teaching normal people, particularly your book, make the noise. Around confidence and communication. So obviously it's like, I think people see you as very well qualified because of the nature of what you do. And then there's also this piece of like, how do we actually embed it in their actual lives?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So my book, Ting Ting, is really about how to manage your anxiety about getting into the spotlight, and how to be able to communicate effectively with an audience or with another person just in a conversation. So how can we manage those things? So a first chunk of that is how do you manage your own state so that you can enter the situation at your most optimal state, which is a lot of embodiment stuff, centering, breathing. That's a huge thing, I think, with regard to anxiety, and making sure that you're coming at something with the best version of yourself. So there's a lot about the breath, especially exhale. The exhale being longer than the inhale is a great way for calming down. Centering, taking up space. I think that's a huge thing for people to actually own the space that they're in and be comfortable with that. So a lot of that stuff about how can I manage myself first before I even begin to get into interaction or presentation.
I mean, the self-regulation, that's a bit of an embodiment superpower, isn't it? Like the martial artists learn it, yogis learn it, and we take it for granted. And I was with a group the other day, and they just learned little basic, Paul Linden type stuff, relaxed belly breathing. And people just felt like super empowered by this idea. You don't have to be in the mood you wake up in. You don't have to be anxious or scared or aggressive. Once you've got into that state, you can actually regulate it.
Yeah,
like, that is possible. Like, I almost think that the embodiment crew, we kind of almost take that for granted. You know what I mean? Yeah,
definitely. I think I hope now that things are changing, but certainly when I was young, this wasn't the sort of stuff that you taught in the schools. No one ever told you that you could regulate your own state, or that you even had any capacity to change your mood or / emotions, or how prepared you felt for something, which I think is crazy, because it's a life skill. How do I make myself be in the optimum mode for whatever's next? Well, I certainly don't want to be anxious and stressed out and constricted and tight and not breathing, because then I'll deliver really, really bad stuff.
I almost think this is like a fundamental orientation of either just being a victim of yourself or of actually being able to be empowered. People talk about empowerment like it's this abstract thing. But how can you be empowered if you can't manage yourself? You know what I mean? Like, that just strikes me as like absolutely the most fundamental life skill. That's because it's a prerequisite for doing anything else well. Yeah,
absolutely. It's you first. You're showing up. How can you be your best version of yourself?
Do you feel embarrassed when you can't self-regulate well? Like, I really the other day there was a student. They talked to me about something at lunch, and I was a bit reactive, and their attitude was not quite what I was expecting. And then afterwards, I felt kind of almost like ashamed as an embodiment teacher that, I didn't shout at them or anything, but I wasn't in the best state for the 2 minutes of that conversation. And I'd sort of forgotten to center, and I'd lost it a bit with them. Do you ever feel sort of embarrassed if you're not confident or, not the best communicator, if that's what you're teaching?
Yeah. Nobody's perfect, are they? And it's we go into certain fields of study, I think, because that's what fascinates us. Why does something fascinate you? Because it's something that affects your experience of life. So going for me, I have moments of low confidence. Absolutely. I have moments where I don't feel good enough. I don't feel strong enough.
Imposter stuff.
Oh, and so much of that stuff. And so that's really a live thing for me that I experience on a day-to-day basis.
And you'd be crap at, sorry to interrupt, you'd be crap at teaching this if you weren't, right? Because if you were just a natural who would never, who was never feeling nervous, never feeling like an imposter, if you had that just naturally, you just didn't need to learn any of this stuff, then you wouldn't really be able to teach anyone else.
Absolutely. Because you would be able to empathize, first of all, with how is this person feeling? Why the hell can't they just get on with it? Because they're fucking scared, And I know that feeling, and I know how much that can get in the way, how much the anxiety can get in the way of you actually being able to deliver something that is, to deliver your best in that moment. I remember doing a stand-up show. This is a few years ago now, and I'd done quite a lot of gigs and things, and then a promoter asked me to come and do a sort of 10-minute on quite a big bill. Like, everyone else on the bill was real names, and I was like, whoa, this is a step up. The audience number was greater than I'd done before, and it was quite, it was quite a special event. And I was consumed with so much anxiety about not being good enough, not, being somehow less than all the other people and incapable. And I did my set, but I felt like I didn't give it my best. I felt like I was wrapped in cling film, I could not connect with the audience. And it was all because of the consuming anxiety that I was having that I couldn't let go of at that time. So I absolutely feel it. I feel those nerves in your stomach, that kind of heightened breath and twitchiness, and I recognize it in others. I feel it in myself, and there's and I use it. I just have to use it because that's who I am.
That's one of the tricks, right? Is to recycle how you are into the process.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I was feeling a little bit nervous or inauthentic because, I've got you on because you're good, but I've also got you on because I want to support your book, right? And I felt like maybe we were playing that out as a sort of game, or my idea, maybe that's just my nervousness. But it's like sort of recycling things into it. And actually naming things is really important. Like when I stood on a stage and said, "Hey guys, I feel a bit nervous standing in front of you," all of a sudden the nervous level goes right down.
Yeah,
I've cut that vicious circle of got to look perfect. Oh my god, I'm worried, therefore I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm relaxed because I've named it, and people are forgiving because they're fucking human and they know what that's like.
Oh yeah. And they're glad it's not them. They're in the audience being comfortable, right?
That's so British. I'm glad it's not me up there. Someone told me the difference between American audiences and some British audiences is American audiences really want you to succeed, whereas sometimes British audiences want you to fail. And I wondered how true this was, like if there's cultural differences between sort of like how we relate to that person on the stage. Is it who do you think you are? Tall poppies in Holland, the Japanese version. Or is there there's a cultural difference maybe in how we it's very British to say, I'm glad it's you up there and not me,
Yeah, it is. Certainly, I feel a difference between an improv audience and a stand-up audience. I certainly felt like when I was doing stand-up, that more combative, like, all right, so you're funny, come on then, what you got? Like a challenge from an audience. Whereas an improv audience,
you're prepped.
Yeah.
And people don't realise that. I didn't realise that stand-up is so prepped. It's only listening to Joe Rogan and a few other podcasts I listen to that have comedians on, that those guys practice, and this, of course, like every line is just rehearsed to find the funniest angle on it. There's almost nothing spontaneous in most stand-up, right?
And I think different comedians do it differently. So you get some people who have a lot of improv in their set, but you get a lot of people who are literally, I know this word by word, beat by beat, I know every rhythm. And that was never me. Like, way too much form there. It's
right.
But yeah, a lot of it is word perfect, refined to the beat. That's not for me. But kind of going back to what you said about confidence, and ever feeling unconfident or feeling like an imposter because that's what you do. What I have found interesting is very comfortable on a stage improvising and creating stuff now. And because I've spent the last year and a half working on a book, the vulnerability there is a real vulnerability and a lack of confidence, I guess, in going, okay, this is the stuff that I fine-tuned and refined, and this is what I am now presenting as a finished product.
Because it's finished, right? There's something about a book that's sort of permanent, which isn't the case when you're on stage, or even if I'm doing my training, I know I'm going to do a better version next year. Like every EFC, I'm making kind of stuff on the schedule, writing stuff down that I'm going to then improve for the next year.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like if it was video. I was a bit nervous recently. We had a podcast releasing coaching sessions because I was like, oh, now it's down. You know, now it's a podcast, you know, some actual coaching of me. And certainly I would have felt even more if it was like, this is the one way to do coaching. I mean, maybe give people some top tips here, because I feel like there are some quick wins. And, you know, recently when Rachel was teaching us, I said to people in the group, I said, listen, this is actually quite important because sooner or later you're going to have a funeral with a eulogy or a best man speech or a work pitch that really matters. There's going to be a place where this really matters, this ability to show up and be seen, right? Maybe not to improvise, but to stand up in front of a group of people and be not to be too nervous. You can't do it. You know, when my sister says, hey, can you do Dad's eulogy? Because I don't feel like I can. At that point, I'm fucking well happy that I can turn to her and say, yeah, I've got this.
Yeah.
I'm well happy that I've got that skill set at that point. So I feel like this isn't a small gift we're giving people here. Like, what are some sort of top quick win tips if people have a best man speech to do like tomorrow?
Okay, so if you have your my top tip is to have at least done it out loud a few times, so you felt it in your mouth, you felt it in your expressions, so that it doesn't seem like alien to you. It feels part of you. I think that's key. And top tip number 2, don't expect to be word perfect. Don't read it. See if you can make a connection with the audience that is genuine, rather than reading out a thing I could have emailed you. So try not to get too tied into what your
written and spoken word are quite different, aren't they, as well? Yeah. Like what we write and what we speak is different. Yeah.
But to clarify, I don't mean don't plan. I mean, I definitely think plan, but just don't get too married to that plan, so that you can feel like you're in the moment there.
Got it.
Breathing. Definitely getting your breath low in the body. Some good stretches that you can do for that. Getting it low and slow, because the panic breath is going to be high in the chest, and shallow and quick. Getting centered. So I would always say, if you're going to come on that stage or in front of your people you're doing a eulogy for or whatever, is get there and look at your audience before you start speaking.
That's one of my trips. When I'm at a conference, I'll find the excuse to get on the stage before my gig at the conference, and I'll stand up and I'll help someone out, or I'll pass someone a microphone who's teaching. I'll stand up and I'll look at who's there, and I'll smile to my friend in the front row, or even I'll come in the break when no one's there and just stand on the stage and get used to that. Yeah, and then I'm like, this is my stage. I'm comfortable, and then I welcome people into the room, you know, and it's like, okay. I don't feel like it's a shock when I step onto it for the first time and look out.
That's a really interesting phrase, actually. It's my stage, definitely. And I always feel like much more capable. If I walked that stage before, if I've stood on that stage and I know it's mine, rather than if I just get plucked out of an audience to like, can we have a volunteer? I get more nervous then. It's like, this is not my stage, this is your stage.
I feel that way about the world, Liz.
This is my world.
I always felt that way. We're like, welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. But it's like my house, you know, that's how I feel about it. So, but yeah, definitely like making it your own. Any other top ones? The breathing, maybe feeling your feet on the ground.
Definitely feeling feet on the ground. Take a pause just to look at your audience before you start. Don't rush in, because you'll go at a breakneck speed. You're going to go faster anyway because you're nervous. So just take that time to like pause, really, really just look at the room, smile at them. You know, they do want you to win. They do.
Yes.
And be there with them. See if you can be as physically relaxed as you can. Like we said earlier, thoughts are constricted when your body is constricted. So how can I be open, rooted, not to the spot in terms of I have no fluidity whatsoever, but grounded and connected, and slow down, always slow down.
Always, yeah. I always have someone stand in the front row to tell, because I'm quick like you. I have someone stand in the front row and give me a hand gesture when I speed up.
Yeah.
They have a little downwards hand gesture. I find that really helpful because sometimes I just forget, Thank you to Claire for doing that. Doing the ICF competition. Claire Meyer, if you're out there. Okay,
that's so helpful, yeah. And then talk to the back of the room as well. That's another one.
Just talk to the back of the room.
Talk to the back of the room.
Friend at the front. Okay.
Yeah, because that cuts. If you're talking to the person on the front, you're just hitting all the key ones. Like, you want to take in the whole room. If you talk to the back, you've got the whole room.
That's nice. Okay, we need to wrap up. So what's the name of the book if people want to Google it?
The book is Own It, How to Boss Your Fears, Free Your Voice and Inspire the Room.
So if they Google Amazon search Own It, Liz Peters, it will come up.
Yes, it will. It will be available on Amazon and on my website.
Great. And guys listening out there, I know we're plugging this a lot and we don't normally do this on the podcast, but it's because I think it's something that is super useful for people, is important. And I almost feel like it's two time frames. There's a long-term embodiment time frame of building a practice, but then there's also just super quick wins that it's like, it's just crazy if you don't know this stuff. So we're all going to need this stuff sooner or later. So I just want to recommend that to people, not just because I know and love you, Liz, but it's, I only have people on the show who I think are good. And it's like, I don't have my students on the show very often because I only have ones on that are already at that high professional level. So I want people to hear that. Okay, do you have a website if people are interested in the corporate work or anything like that?
I do. You can go to my website, which is www.lizpeters.com.
And I'm going to be joining you for the 1 week intensive with the Maydays in Dorset.
Are you?
You didn't know I was coming.
I didn't.
I'm booked in. Put my money where my mouth is. When I say I think you're good, I'm putting a week of my life behind that.
Yeah. Oh, good.
So I'm going to be there with you and John, and people I'm sure can find that under the Maydays website. Is that right?
We can go to the Maydays website. That's www.themaydays.co.uk, and that's all about improv stuff that we do. It's all stuff there.
I need to go do a webinar with the EFC kids who are just coming out of the website. One last one! No! I don't even need to plug EFC. We're not even selling it yet.
Everybody knows about it now.
It's not yet. Everyone in the world knows it exists. I can probably be full up again in the first week. Anyway, so good. Final message about the body. Just one sentence before I have to run.
Final message about the body is finding as much spaciousness in your body as you possibly can will make you feel like you're more capable and you will act in a more effective manner. So finding spaciousness.
Liz Peters, you're more fun than crack. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mark. Cheerio.